Hey,
So
Tom, it's
good morning, everybody. This is a presentation from the Center for Future Consciousness. And what I'm going to be doing today is talking about science fiction scenarios of contact with alien intelligence. And as I mentioned in the announcements I sent out, I did this presentation at the World Future Study Federation conference in Paris in October, but I've developed it a lot further since then, and I thought I would do it online as part of the webinar series. So to begin, as I mentioned, this is a presentation from the Center for Future Consciousness. All of the previous presentations for the Evolution of Science Fiction series are up on the YouTube channel for the Center for Future Consciousness, which you could access off of the website. There are 3 books that I've published on science fiction, which are also good resources in more detail on the first periods of science fiction up through the end of the 1930s with Olaf Stapleton's Star Maker. And as Terry also mentioned, you can go to the website and see my evolving list of all-time best science fiction novels and movies. And you can, of course, find the webinar series there, and you can find links to the books there too. So those are a set of resources that you can go to off of the Center for Future Consciousness to further explore the topic, general topic of science fiction, and in particular, the question of alien contact, which is a major theme within science fiction literature, as well as science fiction movies. Now, just as a beginning, I thought I would show you the description that was put up for this webinar, Insights on Intelligent Life in the Universe Through Science Fiction. From its earliest beginnings, science fiction has thoughtfully speculated on the possibilities of intelligent alien life and alien civilizations. More than any other sphere of inquiry, science fiction has envisioned an immense and diverse assortment of alien biologies, minds, and civilizations. What are some of the most distinctive and imaginative forms of alien life and intelligence and thought-provoking types of encounters between humans and aliens envisioned in science fiction? And that's basically what I'm going to be talking about today, both visions and speculative ideas on aliens, as well as various speculative narratives regarding contact with aliens. But I also thought I'd put up here a second intro to this, which comes from the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, because there's something I want to say in general about the topic of alien contact. And this is from the intro from the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. Aliens may have minds somewhat less capable than ours, of comparable capacity, of greater, even vastly greater power, or minds so different that comparison becomes impossible. They may appear as invaders or teachers, as allies or enemies, as victims of human exploitation or judges of human civilization, as secret masters guiding human history, or as utterly indifferent forces paying no attention to humanity at all. Aliens may look like us, resemble more or less any number of earthly species, or take on shapes we have never seen or imagined, forms so strange, we sometimes fail to recognize them, and they us, as fellow beings at all. And I thought that was sort of a good overview of some of the main different types of aliens envisioned in alien encounters. But I wanted to put it up here because I will give you the link to this article on aliens, because as I progressively try to continually develop this presentation, it eventually hit me that the number of different envisioned aliens in alien encounters was a bottomless pit, literally, that the scope of possibilities and probabilities regarding aliens and encounters vastly exceeds anything I could ever cover in 2 hours. Just like, of course, to try to cover all of science fiction in 2 hours would be a challenge too. So I'm going to be highlighting a number of different themes that have occurred to me, a number of different books and stories, and a variety of movies. But keep in mind that I basically just sort of scratching the surface on the amount of speculation, the vast array of stories that have been written about aliens within science fiction over the last literally almost 2,000 years, because it goes back about 2,000 years. And so at the end, if you want to delve further into the topic of aliens, I'd recommend a good place to start would be with the article out of the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction on aliens. Now, I mentioned in the intro to this presentation that alien contact could be viewed as the most transformative event in human history if it were to occur. Relative to our current global concerns and challenges, whether it be climate change or human violence or the slow but notable reduction in biodiversity, or in various other major concerns that we may have in current human civilization. If intelligent aliens were to make their presence known and come to the Earth to visit us or interact with us, in my mind, that event would have repercussions that would overshadow all of our present concerns and challenges and be more transformative and impactful than any other event in human history. To keep in mind something, here's an image of Columbus coming on shore in the Americas and meeting the indigenous people who lived here and greeting them. And here's a case where an outside group of individuals, an outside civilization, makes contact with the people who live in a particular land. And within the next couple hundred years, this event totally, completely, and utterly destroyed and transformed the ways of life of the people who were living there when the Europeans first came to the Americas. And something similar or comparable could happen to us. Maybe not necessarily conquest, but some deep fundamental changes would occur as a result of being visited and interacting with something that was sufficiently different than us mentally, technologically, culturally, biologically, and the impact of it would be comparable to what happened to the indigenous Americans, if not even more so, in the 15th, 16th, and 17th centuries. So this is something to keep in mind. We might think of alien contact as a way out topic, as a black swan, as something which is kind of really crazy and improbable, and whatever other terms we might use there. But there's lots of reasons to think that there possibly are aliens out in space, intelligent aliens, and the possibility of them making contact with us is not something to be negated or pushed aside, and that in fact, if it happened, it would have a profound and pervasive, multifaceted impact on human civilization and the human mind. Now, I thought a good place to begin with aliens is with one of the contemporary science fiction writers who stands out as an inventor of an immense and fascinating array of different types of alien intelligences, China Miéville. And China Miéville writes a combination of fantasy and science fiction, but China Miéville is very impressive with the variety of different aliens he imagines, different intelligent beings that he imagines, from intelligent beings that have humanoid bodies and insect heads and cactus people and various strange and ferocious kinds of, or peaceful kinds of, other aliens. And in Perdido Street Station and The Scar, which are two great novels of the last 20, 30 years, there's a huge plethora of non-human forms of alien life in there. And in particular, I want to mention his novel Embassy Town, where he envisions these aliens, which he calls the Ariki, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, who have a totally different mentality, mode of language, kind of consciousness and identity, and it turns into a real challenge for humans to communicate and meaningfully interact with them. And the reason why I'm bringing Miéville up is, on one hand, he's incredible, one of the best in terms of envisioning strange minds, strange cultures, strange biological, psychological beings. But he has acknowledged in his own writings that, in essence, it's sort of impossible to imagine what an alien mind would be like. But fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And even though Miéville acknowledges, given our own human mindset and perspective on reality and how difficult it would be to break out of that mindset, he goes right ahead and tries to imagine different possibilities of different kinds of minds. And the one I think where he does it best is with an Embassy Town and the Eureka, who have a different, totally different kind of identity and different way of thinking about the nature of their own minds and reality and of language. But he acknowledges all along that indeed this could be seen as an impossible task, because we're only able to imagine alien minds from the perspective of human minds. But science fiction writers, including Miéville, have gone ahead and tried to do this over and over again. And he's a good place to begin, a good source of a lot of different visions. Now, looking back at history, a significant thing we should notice is that in our history, we personified the heavens with the zodiac, and with believing that gods and goddesses and various higher beings existed in the heavens above. We had expressions like, here there be dragons, and the heavens were the abodes of the gods. And so we have a long history of looking up into the sky and thinking and believing that there are different kinds of intelligent beings or consciousnesses up there, beginning with our personification of the heavens in terms of deities and various theological or religious visions of mythical beings. And so you could see aliens, our contemporary vision of aliens, as a modern evolutionary expression of ancient mythic consciousness. We personified and have personified the heavens for thousands of years, first based on one theory of reality, and now are with newer scientific theories of reality, we've populated the skies with a new plethora of beings, aliens that in some ways are similar to the kinds of things we envisioned thousands of years ago. In fact, we could see aliens as psychosocial projections of our own sense of identity and our own ideals. That is, we anthropomorphize the sky. We put out into the sky above us, into the heavens surrounding us, basic human themes and concepts. Now, the three I have up here to begin with are angels, demons, and gods. Now, demons probably aren't associated so much with the heavens, but angels and gods are. But as three archetypal personifications from the deep past, aliens, in fact, take the form of angels, demons, and gods in contemporary times. Like, first off, here's an image from a book written at the beginning of the 20th century about humans visiting Mars. And here's the Martians with wings looking like angels. And they're not the only aliens that have been envisioned as angelic-like. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the creature alien, which is definitely a modern contemporary expression of our notion or beliefs about demons. And then we have close encounters where we have the mothership, which looks like some kind of incredible manifestation of some kind of godlike, powerful being that comes down to see us and visit us. And so our notions of angels, demons, and gods become manifested in our visions of aliens. They're as psychosocial projections. In fact, we may see aliens as God. Beliefs in aliens can take on a religious quality and are associated with heavenly, transcendent, elevating, redeeming presence, and aliens are coming to save the world, save humanity. People become very obsessed over aliens and the possibility of alien contact. There are plenty of stories all over the globe of people who say that they have contacted aliens, and plenty of organizations that think about aliens, groups that think about aliens. And up here, I have an image from a book where they used a painting by William Blake, Is God an Alien Extraterrestrial? So aliens can be seen almost as if they are some kind of higher religious presence in the cosmos, like the gods were seen that way, and that they're going to save us and elevate us and transform us somehow in the future. Lots of times, though, we anthropomorphize aliens, especially at first. The earliest visions we have of aliens in science fiction and fantasy literature, by and large, are human-like. But these images right here of a Vulcan and of the creatures from the movie Prometheus are both rather human-like in their qualities. And it does require a challenge to try to envision something different than a human-like form as a form of intelligence, but we have frequently anthropomorphized aliens and making them look like or be like very similar to humans. And part of this is that as some people have pointed out about why we want to believe in aliens and want to see the heavens above us as populated, is we have this human desire for community and togetherness and support that we want to see in the cosmos that surrounds us. That is, our desire for being part of some bigger whole, and our desire for us being part of some big community helps to fuel and stimulate all of this interest that we have, supports all this interest we have in aliens. Now, we can see the heavens above as empty space, as populated, or as incomprehensible and terrifying otherness. And at the other end here, I have an image of one of H.P. Lovecraft's most significant speculative creations, the Cthulhu, as something which is incomprehensibly different than us and terrifying on top of it all. And so even though we may desire a sense of togetherness with the heavens personified through aliens, we also have this apprehension of there may be something incomprehensible and terrifying and totally different than us and indifferent to us out there. But as Arthur C. Clarke said, there's two possibilities. Either we're alone in the universe or we are not, and both are equally terrifying. And that's a quote that's often used in talking about the possibility of aliens, because in fact, if we are alone, then that's a terrifying experience to have in the vastness of the cosmos. And if we're not alone, then there's the fear of how this otherness, this difference is going to be, and how we're going to interact with it, or how it's going to see us. And so both possibilities are terrifying. Indeed, when we look at aliens and think about them, we're tapping into some very fundamental mindsets, some very fundamental ways in which we experience reality, and in this case here, view and react to the cosmos. We have the dimension of hope versus fear. Are we going to be hopeful about the aliens or fearful? Are we going to be in a sense of awe? Or is it possible we're going to be in a sense of bewilderment, of mystery? And all those different general mindsets, those different psychological stances come out when we think about aliens and we speculate on them. Now, believe it or not, the earliest aliens envisioned go back to Lucian and his book, True History, which was written about 120 A.D. Now, Epicurus and Lucretius, who were Roman, Greek-influenced philosophers of before the Common Era, BCE, believed that there was life in other worlds, and Lucian was in fact familiar with Epicurus and Lucretius's writings, and wrote what might be considered the first science fiction and outer space novel called True History. And in that, and this is 120 AD, believing that there is life in the heavens above, he envisioned creatures of the moon and creatures of the sun and creatures from the star Sirius. And you can't read the captions on this, but you can see the images. And Lucretius had a pretty fertile imagination for how he envisioned aliens or beings of the moon and of the sun looking, from bird-like to insect-like, spiders and ghostly beings and warriors. There's obviously a good deal of psychological projection going on there. But he also envisioned this story as involving war and conquest and colonization and technologies, advanced technologies. And so a number of the themes that come up in narratives about aliens definitely come up in Lucian's True History, because the beings of the moon and the beings of the sun engage in a war over who was going to colonize Venus, and humans actually participate in this interstellar war. So you could, not interstellar, interplanetary war. So you could almost envision Lucian's book as being the first space opera to emerge, which is about 120 AD. Keeping in mind here that the belief that there is life on other worlds, which Lucian was familiar with, goes back before the birth of Christ. In Greco-Roman culture, it's there, that belief. Now, if we move forward into modern times, early modern times, we see lots of people expressing and writing about the idea of aliens and alien worlds. Early narratives pop up in the first couple centuries after the scientific revolution sets in. The images I have up here, beginning with Bruno, who believed that there was an indeterminate number of worlds out in the universe and that these worlds had life on them. Kepler, who in his novel Somnium envisioned beings on the moon. Huygens and his cosmotheorists attempted to describe aliens living on different planets in the solar system based upon the planetary conditions that exist on the different planets in the solar system. Fontenelle, who talked about beings from on the different planets, and Cyrano de Bergerac, who, as one of his writings, wrote The Comical History of the States and Empires of the Worlds of the Moon and the Sun, where humans visited the moon and actually visited the sun and encountered aliens living on both of those solar bodies. So early on in the 16th and 17th centuries, Europeans were thinking about aliens and beginning to envision what they would be like. Voltaire, in his novel Micromegas, introduces an interesting theme into the whole story about alien narratives, which is that aliens from the star Sirius and the planet Saturn come to visit humanity and decide that we are exceedingly vain and narrow-minded and stupid, and that they look upon us as being ridiculous, tiny little creatures, which we are. And the story is actually set in the form of alien visitation, a critique on the vanity of humanity in the context of the cosmos. So science comes in here, philosophy comes in here, this sense of there being aliens out there in space, and they could be vastly superior comes in. And then when we move into the 19th century, in particular with Camille Flammarion, who brings the theory of evolution into thinking about aliens, Flammarion starts to try to envision, based on evolutionary thinking, what would aliens be like on different planets, including Mars and including other planets in the solar system. And Percival Lowell, a little bit later, speculates on whether or not there might be ancient alien civilization on Mars. And Flammarion in particular mixes up his evolutionary thinking with mystical ideas, which I'll come to a little bit later on. But aliens can take the form of some kind of spiritual beings as well. But Flammarion also was very scientific and evolutionary. So there's a lot of thinking going on in the 17th and 18th and 19th century about aliens. John Jacob Astor, Journeying of the Worlds, Humans Visit Jupiter and Saturn and other planets. and hunt aliens like they're on a safari. And Lowell, as I mentioned already, saw the Martians as being more advanced and older than us. So lots of thinking going on during that couple hundred years. But the person who really puts aliens on the map, so to speak, in pop culture, begins his novel about aliens with these very famous lines, which you probably have heard. As men busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacency, man went to and fro over this globe about their little affairs, serene in their assurance of their empire over matter. Yet across the gulf of space, minds that are to our minds as ours are to those of the beasts that perish, intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. And many of you probably know that's the beginning of, right at the beginning of Wells' novel, The War of the Worlds. In this case here, the Martians are the aliens who are studying us, who are vastly superior, who are not like humans, but look more like hideous octopus with long tentacles. There's a couple early images of Martians up there. Wells bases his idea of the Martians on his strong evolutionary thinking of what intellects that developed incredible minds and big brains and were ancient in their history, what they might look like. And in fact, there's an image up there, the third one over, that looks a little bit comical, but this is an image actually of Wells' vision of what future humans would look like with atrophied bodies and big heads. And now this is Man in the Year 1,000,000, a picture from that essay that Wells wrote. And Wells' aliens, his Martians in The War of the Worlds, which he wrote later, in a variety of ways are similar to this vision he had about what would advanced humans look like 1,000,000 years in the future. The big heads, the atrophied bodies, low to the ground. And so Wells, through scientific, futurist, evolutionary, and non-anthropomorphic thinking into his aliens, and then he saw these Martians as and this is a critique of Western civilization, as imperialistic and conquering of new lands, needing new resources. In this case here, he's critiquing the West invading other parts of the world. In this case here, it's the Martians invading us for the same reasons, the same motives. He also has a second example early on of inventiveness with aliens, which is from The First Men in the Moon, where he discusses Selenites, who are beings of the moon, which have a caste system with a central authoritarian figure controlling all of the different specialized groups of Selenites. And so Wells gets into early on here, this is around the turn of the 19th into the 20th century, these visions of non-anthropomorphic aliens with different strange civilizations and humans having contact with them and being wary. Of course, humans should be wary of, the motives and intentions behind these aliens, whether the Martians or the Selenites. And the Selenites are contemplating in The First Men in the Moon the possibility of invading the Earth as well. Now, this image I found on Google someplace, and I thought it was interesting because the amount of imagination and fascination that has gone into Martians with Wells, Flammarion, Percival, and then up into the early 20th century, we've come up with lots of different images of what Martians are like. We have Wells Martians up here. We also have something comparable to Stapleton's Martians up here. We have the Martians from A Martian Odyssey up here. As you can see, human imagination has gone wild with what are the Martians going to be like? Of course, we know, at least in terms of our rather superficial study of Mars, that none of these creatures live up there, but human imagination went wild with different possibilities for Martians. And in fact, probably the type of aliens that have been imagined in the greatest variety have been the Martians. Sometimes they're anthropomorphized, they look like humans from across the zodiac on the left side. Sometimes they look like strange octopus, like from War of the Worlds, and everywhere in between. Now, when we come into the 20th century, the number of different kinds of aliens envisioned explodes, proliferates in great variety over the first couple decades of the 20th century. Three people I just wanted to mention, I'll come back to them as we go along, are Edgar Rice Burroughs, who envisions, I forgot just to mention that before Burroughs, we had some other speculations on aliens on Venus and aliens throughout the solar system. In George Griffith's A Honeymoon in Outer Space, and Garrett Service's A Columbus in Space. This is contemporary with the first decade of H.G. Wells. But I was going to mention where I was going with this was the number of different Martians and then also Venusians and also Lunites, beings of the moon, that Edgar Rice Burroughs envisioned in the first couple decades of the 20th century in his Mars novels, his Venus novels, and in his Moonmaid series. So Burroughs early on really popularized with his extremely best-selling novels, of which there were many, huge variety of different aliens that could exist on our neighboring Mars, the moon, and on Venus. Maybe not so scientifically plausible, but he did a lot of inventive speculation of what these beings would be like on those three solar bodies. But soon thereafter, a science fiction writer that a lot of people probably haven't heard of, Edmund Hamilton, created a huge assortment of aliens in his novels about space exploration and about wars in outer space. And in fact, very often Hamilton's stories involve wars between aliens and humans. Hamilton and his various stories about the interstellar patrol predates in ways Star Trek, and visions that Star Trek develops later on, 50 years later, in confederations between aliens and humans. When we get to Doc Smith and the Chronicles of the Lensman series, we find some very fundamental themes. Of course, we're going to have wars with aliens. That's one thing. And that happens with Doc Smith and the Lensman series. We also have archetypes of good and evil, good aliens and bad aliens, the Arisians and the Andorians. We also have aliens that are mental and not even physical, and 4D aliens. And we have aliens that are monitoring and attempting to manipulate what goes on the Earth, the Assyrians and the Andorians, through both evil and good intentions. We have invaders, we have conquerors and destroyers. So we have a lot of war mentality in the 1920s and 1930s in thinking about aliens and our interactions with aliens, which reflects our popular culture at the time, having just come out of World War I and moving closer and closer into World War II. And Burroughs, Hamilton, and Doc Smith, between them, envisioned an incredible variety of aliens in all different forms, with all different powers and capacities. The one that was probably the most inventive of the period, the 1930s at least, was Olaf Stapleton and his novel Star Maker. And up here I have a number of drawings that Leslie's son Alex, Leslie Combs' son Alex is an artist, created of different strange beings that Stapleton envisions in his novel a Star Maker. And Stapleton attempts to transcend the anthropomorphic, things that don't look like humans. He attempts to transcend our psychological mindset about aliens by envisioning different forms of life that are very at odds with the way humans live. We have symbiotic aliens, where two different alien forms couple together. We have aquatic aliens like the nautiloids, where they literally are an intelligent ship that sails across alien seas. The plant men who worship and turn toward the sun and plant themselves into the ground. Stapleton was probably more imaginative in the forms aliens could take, physical, biological, and also the mindsets, the psychologies of different aliens, as he explored the universe in Star Maker. And he envisioned worlds that were technological constructions and stellar systems that were created by aliens. And even got to the point, by the time you get to the end of Star Maker, where he envisions an intergalactic cosmic mind, which is an integration of alien minds across the cosmos in the very distant future. So a lot of people will look at Stapleton as being coming right on the heels of Smith and Hamilton as the most creative and prolific and imaginative person regarding aliens in the early few decades of the 20th century. Now, I wanted to, in particular, highlight something that has that continually comes up regarding aliens and alien contact, and that's the Fermi paradox. Where are the aliens? Lots of scientists, as well as scientifically minded individuals, believe that there's got to be alien intelligence in the universe besides us. The universe is immense, and that's sort of a silly way of saying it. Our own Milky Way has hundreds of billions of stars and probably 1 trillion planets in it, and that's only just one galaxy. The universe is 13, 14 billion years old, depending upon the particular calculations, with so many different planetary bodies, so many different solar systems, such a vast amount of time. It stands to reason that we can't be the only ones here who have reached some level of intelligence and civilization. But then why, when we look up in the sky, do we not see indications of advanced alien civilizations? That's the Fermi paradox. If it's so probable, why aren't there any signs of it? Now, a lot of people will say that they've communicated with aliens, they've met aliens, but the scientific establishment and sort of general common sense right now is that there hasn't been any publicly accessible, clear evidence that aliens exist or have visited us. And so why is that? Now, there's a lot of different explanations given. I just wanted to highlight a couple things up here. One of them, which comes from actually Olaf Stapleton, and then Star Trek takes it up, is the Prime Directive. But the Prime Directive is actually in Star Maker. The Prime Directive is aliens in outer space do not interfere with what's going on a planet. They leave a planet alone and let it develop according to its natural course. And so even though there's aliens up there in the sky, out in the heavens, and they're watching us, they're not going to interfere with what's going on, so they don't make their presence known. And that's an idea that people are familiar with in Star Trek, but in fact, it's an idea that is in Star Maker. David Brin, I wanted to mention, who's a contemporary science fiction writer, because if one wants to have a look at all the different kinds of explanations for why we don't see any indications of aliens, his book Existence is a great novel that deals with, I think he has about 40 different possible explanations. One that I find particularly fascinating for why we don't see aliens in outer space or have any evidence of it is in Alistair Reynolds' book, Revelation Space. And if our universe is 13, 14 billion years old, perhaps intelligent life emerged all over the place in the first 4, 5, 6 billion years of the universe's history. And all of that intelligent, technologically advanced life got into a big cosmic shooting match, pretty well obliterated each other. And what emerged out of it was a single alien species which watches over the entire cosmos. And anytime a species begins to emerge that has spacefaring technological powers, that overseer of the cosmos, the last surviving species of the Dawn War, wipes them out. So we better not go too far into outer space, or else we may get wiped out too. The dark forest scenario, which comes up in Jean-Lou's Three Body Problem series, and here I have up a couple of pictures of the Tricelerians. The dark forest scenario is that outer space is dangerous. If you stick your face out and make yourself visible, somebody's going to pop you off. It's like we're all in a jungle, the cosmos, and literally we have to watch what's going on and not make ourselves visible, because then we'd be open to attack, which is what humans do in the Three Body Problem series, and they ask for trouble. So maybe everybody is in hiding. They don't want to be seen. Now, when I put up the announcement for this webinar, a fellow futurist, Joseph Voris, sent me an article on Hoag's object. And this is a galaxy that I'm not sure exactly how far away it is. I forgot to write it down. However many, it would have to be millions of light years away. And the interesting thing to note about this galaxy is how symmetrically structured it looks. And Voris just throws out the idea, which is worth considering, that this galaxy has actually been manipulated and sculptured by some galactic level intelligence that exists within it. So maybe there are indications of alien intelligence up there on a galactic solar level, but we haven't really recognized them as such. They're there. And this one is rather suggestive because it looks a bit too symmetrical and tidy in its arrangement to be just entirely natural. And I can send you the link to Boris's article on this and the reasons that he has for thinking that there's some possibility that this might be an indication of alien intelligence. So we're facing Fermi's paradox. Why don't we see any indications of them being there? Now, what I want to go through right now, I'll just start this ball rolling, then we'll take a break, is some of the different characteristic kinds of encounters that we have envisioned regarding aliens. Now, one of them we've already started to get into, and it's been extremely pervasive and influential throughout our history of thinking about aliens, is that we envision the aliens invading us. Psychosocial projections of fear of being invaded perhaps by other countries, but we have an extremely powerful pop fascination with alien invasions. The War of the Worlds is a classic example of it, but there's been many others. And in fact, Orson Welles in the 1930s, in 1938, in fact, he did a radio show recreating the Martian invasion, although it takes place in New Jersey, in the radio show, not in England. And the commentary that's on this little clip up here ends up stating that humans are, Americans are terror junkies, that we can't get enough of it, that we find it very fascinating, and our minds get latched on to these ideas about something terrible, something awful, in this case here, aliens invading us, and we obsess on it. And the reason why Wells' radio show caused some degree of panic, whatever degree that was because people are tuned into it and they grab hold on it attentively. They are fascinated with the idea of terror and mayhem and disaster. In this case here, the aliens invading us. And back in the 1930s, one of them I mentioned already, but I'm going to introduce the second one here, two of the most rich visions of aliens invading and attacking either our solar system or the Earth were created in the Interstellar Patrol stories by Edmund Hamilton and John Campbell in his novel Invaders from the Infinite. So aside from Wells' story early on about the Martians invading us, in the 1930s, we had some very rich and powerful, interesting, and varied cases of aliens invading us from these two science fiction writers, Campbell and Hamilton. In the 1950s, we get an immense number of movies of aliens invading us during the Cold War, and the argument being that people were worried about the Russians invading us, and so we projected it, psychosocial projection of fear, into aliens invading us. And so we had Invaders from Mars and Earth versus the Flying Saucers. Okay, but that scenario of aliens invading us continues into contemporary times. We had Independence Day in a comical way. We had Mars Attacked. I just have up a few here. Battle Los Angeles, the aliens invade Los Angeles and destroy it. And then most recently, I think it's on Apple, we have the series Invasion, where the aliens invade us there too. And this has been one of the most common scenarios of aliens and human encounters. The aliens are invading us. And then the three-body problem, which I've already mentioned, a contemporary Chinese vision of the aliens invading us. In this case here, we send out signals into outer space, and the aliens decide on Alpha Centauri that the Earth is a more hospitable place for them to live than where they are. And so they come and invade us. And this is a very rich and intricate and a fascinating description of alien invasion and humans trying to prepare for it, because we have several hundred years to prepare for the invasion, realizing that it's coming and what happens as a consequence of it. So this has been going on, the alien invasion scenario, common one. The aliens are going to destroy us and we're going to destroy civilization, etc. And that's connected up with another very common scenario, is that we're going to battle with aliens, and whether it's on the Earth or out in outer space. In fact, given our war mentality, this is psychosocial projection again, given the fact that we envision reality often because of our history in terms of conflicts and military conflicts, we envision interacting with aliens in wars and military confrontations. And in fact, one of the most popular kinds of science fiction today is military science fiction, which has to do very often with high-tech conflicts between humans and aliens, but also humans and humans too, but military mentality. Now, on Star Trek, which was very popular and still is to some degree, we had our military adversaries in the Klingon and the Romulans, who were enemies, and we had to fight with them in various ways, attempting to realize peace somehow in the long run. But Star Trek had its military mindset with military opposition. And in fact, here's one image of all the different kinds of aliens envisioned on Star Trek. And in fact, although a lot of these are not adversaries, a lot of them are envisioned as adversaries, military adversaries. And the thing to note here, because Star Trek didn't have enough technology, didn't have enough money for special effects, is all of the aliens here are pretty much human or human-like, even if they have lizard faces. They basically all are humanoid in form. But as one of the great war novels, science fiction novels, war scenarios involving humans versus aliens, we have Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers, and the aliens in there are definitely not humanoid-like. In fact, what they are is they're insect-like. And as a point that maybe you have noticed is that bad aliens, usually evil ones, are either insect or reptilian-like. Not necessarily always, but lots of times they are. So when we envision something that's evil, we, for some reason or other, think it's got to be somehow shaped like an insect or somehow shaped like a reptile. So that may be a good place to stop for a little break for 5 minutes. Right, Terry? Another possibility, besides military confrontation, is the aliens subjugate us. They control us. They've come here and we become creatures who hide away, who have to fight and try to hold on to our freedom. Two classic stories about aliens conquering and then putting humans into a subservient position are The Moon Maid from Edgar Rice Burroughs and the Tumathex trilogy, which was one of Isaac Asimov's favorite stories written back in the 1930s, and one of my favorite ones too, about aliens controlling the surface of the earth and humans having to live underground. More recently on TV, we have Colony. Okay, good. On TV, we have Colony and we have Falling Skies, where aliens have conquered us and that we are trying to fight to regain our freedom. And this is a theme that comes up. I got 4 examples up here, but of humans being subjugated by aliens and then humans somehow having to fight to regain their freedom. The aliens have conquered us. Now, we have lots of different kinds of deadly alien scenarios. Aliens who eat us, who impregnate us, absorb us, hunt us, or suck out our blood, or suck our blood out. early on, Proxima Centauri, the aliens are plants and a reversal of relationships. The plants eat animals, like us animals eating plants, but they eat animals. And we encounter these ferocious plants that want to eat us. And the wonder stories down there below, we have a dangerous world, marooned in Andromeda, where humans have to deal with an incredible variety of dangerous aliens on another planet, from plants to different animals. And that's a scenario that shows up quite frequently. We visit another planet and we find lots of dangerous aliens there who are going to eat us. One of the classic ones was Black Destroyer by A.E. Van Vogt, one of the most famous dangerous aliens who suck out our potassium, and they look like cats. Another very famous one was Who Goes There by John Campbell, where the shapeshifters are able to absorb humans and change into the appearance of humans and mimic them or any other living creature, which was eventually distorted and made into the movie The Thing, but based on Campbell's Who Goes There. In the Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man, we find out that the aliens have given us a cookbook to serve man. And humans thinking at first that the aliens were beneficent and wanted to help us, when actually they wanted to eat us. And then we have the whole Predator series, lately a really good installment in it, Prey, where the aliens see us as a hunting challenge. They come here to hunt us. So we have lots of visions of aliens who are going to, in one way or the other, consume, destroy, eat us, or suck our blood out. Really evil visions. If not our bodies, we have aliens who have invade and capture our minds. Some classic examples, Sinister Barrier by Eric Russell, where we don't know the aliens are here and they're controlling our minds and they're controlling human history. And we finally discover that we've been manipulated by these sinister aliens who've been doing this for quite a while. Now, there's lots of people who take this as a plausible position regarding human history, that there must be some evil, sinister force controlling us that we're not aware of that's making us behave so stupid. And Sinister Barrier is a science fiction example of that. H.P. Lovecraft, who created a whole slew of hideous and strange beings, and The Whisperer in Darkness envisions aliens who come and absorb the body and take control of the body and the mind of humans. The Midwich Cuckoos, which is a great novel about aliens who come down and fertilize human babies, and the aliens' presence, intelligence is in them. Another Lovecraft novel, The Shadow Out of Time, where aliens who existed millions of years ago, here's another paranormal one, existed millions of years ago, are able to reach out through time, and their minds are able to invade our minds today and pull our minds back into their bodies millions of years ago. And the Puppet Masters, which was an interesting variation on the same theme that's in Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Heinlein, where we have aliens who attach on and control us. And another one in this regard, where aliens capture our minds, it's a great movie, Dark City, where in this case here, they capture our minds, they manipulate our minds, and they manipulate reality, and we don't stop and think about what's going on. So aliens could capture our minds as opposed to destroy our bodies. We have the theme, which I've already introduced, about aliens monitoring us, controlling us. The classic examples back from Doc Smith, the Rissians and the Andorians, who are monitoring us and attempting to control the history of human civilization. The Day the Earth Stood Still, which was based on Farewell to the Master by Alan Bates, in which the aliens had been watching us, decide we're getting too dangerous too out of control and come down and give us a warning that we better get our act together. And in more recent times, we got the same kind of theme, but at a new level now, the rapture of the nerds, where our technological obsession with increasingly spreading our very energy-hungry technology into the solar system and into supporting supercomputers finally gets the attention of aliens beyond our solar system, who warn us that we have to pull back on our efforts to create the technological singularity or live within it because we're out of hand. Now, humans could be envisioned as attempting to control and subjugate and destroy the aliens. In a journey in other worlds, we go off hunting aliens. In Conquest of Goya, we invade a planet consisting entirely of female aliens, and it backfires on us. In Martian Chronicles, through our own neglect and desire for conquest and spreading of our human way of life, we destroy the Martian civilization. And more recently, we have examples like District 9, excuse me, where we segregate the aliens who come to the Earth. And Ender's Game, where we destroy them all because they think they're a danger to us. And Avatar, where we attempt to push and move the aliens about because we want the resources that their holy tree is planted right above. And A Deepness in the Sky by Vinor Vinci, the aliens are intelligent spiders, and we attempt to control and destroy their civilization. So we have lots of stories about humans not being conquered by aliens, but in reverse, attempting to conquer them. Now we have a theme that's come up throughout history, that aliens are our ancestors, or they created us, or they're the ancient gods that we talk about. And some early ones are The Retreat to Mars, back from the 1930s, where we're Martians. We're planted here by beings from Mars a long, long time ago, and we've forgotten that. At the Mountains of Madness and the Shadow of Time, both by Lovecraft, there's visions of aliens who lived on the Earth millions of years ago. And another Edmund Hamilton story, Devolution, we are devolved forms of super advanced aliens who settled here millions of years ago. In movies, we have Prometheus, where the aliens made us, and Stargate, the aliens are the ancient Egyptian gods, in particular Ra. In Mission to Mars, we were created and seeded by the Martians, and we share a DNA with Martians. And a lot of these examples, we see this idea of community or connectedness with aliens, if they're our ancestors, if we're related to them. But we also see examples where there were ancient aliens that were totally different than anything imaginable as far as human went. Now, I want to just throw up a slide on a basic theme. There's going to be lots of other novels that I'm not mentioning here, but the theme of psychological cultural shock. Not that the shock is the physical invasion, not that the shock or the drama is going to be getting eaten or consumed, but simply the jolt that comes through one type of mind, one type of culture, encountering a different type, and that different type of mindset or mind, mentality, and culture might be totally disruptive to human mentality. Now, and I have up here an illustration of a theme that I wanted to bring up in this regard. Francis Goodwin's 1638 novel, The Man in the Moon. And it was very representative of early space traveling alien contact stories, because when the human gets to the moon, the first thing the human asks the inhabitants of the moon is if they believe in Jesus Christ, if Christ is their God, their divinity. Because if it isn't, he's going to leave, because they can't possibly be something that we want to interact and deal with. And so in the 17th century, the culture of the time saw Christ and the Christian Trinity and that mindset as critical to civilization, toward ethics, toward morality. And it was a criteria that aliens would be evaluated relative to. In the 1950s, James Blish wrote his Hugo Award-winning novel, A Case of Conscience, where we encounter aliens who appear to be ethically superior to us, but don't believe in God. And this turns out to be perceived as a threat to religious thinkers of the era. And in the end, the religious powers in the world decide they have to do something about this species because it's a threat to their whole power structure. It's almost like it's like a variation on the Grand Inquisitor, where Christ comes back and they throw him in jail. In this case here, these superior ethical beings appear, but they don't believe in our God and anything like it. And they're a threat. They're seen as a threat. Starman is a good novel, not a good novel, good movie regarding the perception of threat humans may have with respect to aliens, not based upon their technology, their desire to conquer us, but because they may be so different and distinct, they would unsettle the whole power structure and belief systems of earthly humans. And that's a scenario, I think, that definitely aligns up with what I said at the beginning, that contact with aliens may significantly transform humanity more than any other event in our history, perhaps not so much because they may try to conquer civilization, destroy it, but because they introduce a different mentality, a different culture into things. Aliens, in fact, can be seen, and visions of aliens, as psychosocial thought experiments in terms of transcendent futures for humans, as dystopias or utopias that could be envisioned as ways to think about possibilities for humans. Olaf Stapleton does this in Star Maker. H.G. Wells does it in The First Men in the Moon with the Selenite civilization. And I want to mention here a really great classic novel about Martians by Kurt Laswitz, Two Planets, where Laswitz envisions this advanced Martian civilization. And it's not just technologically advanced, it's social, culturally, ethically advanced. And it's like a blueprint that Maslow produced, not the Maslow, that Laswitz produces for how we would envision an ideal human society. And so aliens and their societies can have served the function of being thought experiments on how mentality and society could be organized differently for humans, both in dystopian visions like Wells' First Men in the Moon, and utopian visions like in Star Maker and Two Planets. Now, something that happens rather frequently is humans and aliens have sex with each other. It's a common scenario throughout the last 100 years. All the way back to Navigators of Infinity, where the humans who land on Mars, one of them falls in love with the six-eyed Martian woman, and after a while, he doesn't even notice she has six eyes. But it's an extremely touching and romantic tale of how beings of different physical forms and to some degree different psychologies could end up in a romantic resonance, a reaching out, a connection across space. Alita, the goddess of Mars, falls in love with a human. Shemblu is an alien female who hypnotizes and seduces human males. A rose for Ecclesiastes. Braxis seduces the human. Braxis is a Martian. The Lovers by Philip Jose Farmer. The aliens are seductive beings who require other beings for reproduction and use humans to serve that end. Strange Relations, also by Farmer, where humans actually become almost immersed with aliens in erotic relationships. And as a rather mystical and imaginative story, Sherry Tepper's Grass, more recently, in which a woman, a central character of the novel, falls in love with a fox, but it's not really a fox, and it's not really all that visible, and it's rather ethereal in form, and she develops this psychological romantic resonance with this fox of another world. And it's a really good example of imaginative aliens, what would be a romantic relationship with one, and how it could possibly emerge given how different we could be from aliens. But love and sex with aliens shows up frequently. We have the super evolved alien scenario. Obviously, Stapleton has them. Forbidden Planet was a great movie about super evolved Krell, who, and there is a lesson in this, that no matter how mentally evolved get, you have to be cognizant of your basic animal core. We have super evolved aliens in Star Trek. Let me go, I forgot their name. I have it written down. Just give me 1 second. The Telosians, who are able to manipulate human consciousness and provide a virtual reality for Captain Pike, which is better than his crippled reality that he's in. And then we have, in case you've never seen a picture of one, the Tralfamadorians from Slaughterhouse-Five, who are able to transcend time and see the entirety of the eternity of the universe all at once. And here's somebody's image of a Tralfamadorian. The Tralfamadorians are the ones who take Billy Pilgrim to the planet Tralfamador, and Billy Pilgrim is able to observe from this higher level of consciousness provided by the Tralfamadorians a perspective on all the episodes of his life taken as a totality through the eyes of eternity, the eyes of the Tralfamadorians. So we have lots of super evolved aliens. And connected to that, we have the benevolent aliens, like from Close Encounters. I have up here to begin with, though, Camille Flammarion, who I mentioned earlier, as the person who brought evolution strongly into thinking about what aliens would be like. Well, Flammarion had a telescope in his house, but he also had a seance room. And Flammarion believed that aliens up in outer space were reincarnated human souls. So he thought after you died, you ascended up into the heavens. No, that's the same idea as in religious thinking, but the literal heavens, and became a being on another planet, but a reincarnated version of yourself from down here on Earth. And so we have these spiritually elevated beings who live out in space, who are us, through multiple incarnations, keep advancing higher and higher into the heavens above. The first time we make contact with beings from another star in Distant Worlds by John Maynard, the aliens are very angelic and beautiful and loving, and they are not in any sense whatsoever frightening. And so we have this history beginning back in the 19th century now of the good, benevolent aliens as opposed to the hideous, terrifying ones. And three examples of benevolent or good or admirable aliens of today would be E.T., Close Encounters, and Contact. Although in Contact, they're a bit enigmatic, of course, but still in all cases, the aliens are good. And we have the Adorians back from Arisians, excuse me, back from the Lensman Chronicle, who were deeply ethical and moral beings who were attempting to guide us in a positive fashion. We can engage in confederations with aliens, come together into groups. The beginning examples are again going to be Lensman and Hamilton with the Interstellar Patrol. And those stories all involve humans combining together with aliens from other planets and defending the good, defending the Earth, defending the solar system. But we enter into partnerships, confederations. The more modern classic example is Star Trek and the Federation in Star Trek, where we come together and form pluralistic confederations of humans and aliens. Ringworld by Larry Niven. We have various aliens here. I'm showing a couple of the aliens from Ringworld, where we work together, perhaps not always in a great fashion, but in this case here, working together to explore the monumental structure Ringworld. So we can have these interspecies confederations, connections. The real classic example in science fiction literature is David Brin's Uplift series, where we're part of a whole group of species, in part in competition, but in part in cooperation. In the movies, we have Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets, where we work together with aliens. Guardians of the Galaxy, where we have 6 different species on that ship with the one human, and then the tree creature and the raccoon creature and the green girl and the other one and the robotic one. We have lots of different aliens working together with humans. And for Earthbound case, we have the TV series Defiance, which takes place in our future, where humans and aliens now populate the Earth, and we have to learn how to live and work together. So there's lots of visions of aliens and humans working together, forming confederations, partnerships, maybe sometimes uneasy, but in fact, becoming part of some bigger whole. We have aliens who try to facilitate our evolution, but we don't want to evolve. 2 planets, which I've mentioned already, the Martians attempt to elevate us, educate us, and we rebel against it. Seedling of Mars, where humans are given all of the possible beneficial products of the planetary consciousness on Mars, and a lot of humans won't buy into it because they don't want to take gifts from aliens. In Light, the aliens who want to elevate us and enlighten us are so frightening to the central character that he sees the alien as some kind of hideous demon. But actually, all the alien tries to do through the novel, which is a retelling of 2001 in ways, is to psychologically, philosophically elevate the human. But humans resist against their evolution being facilitated by aliens. But there's other examples of stories where aliens do facilitate the evolution of humans, like in Child of Zen, where the aliens turn out to look like the devil or Satan. In 2001, where human evolution is facilitated through very enigmatic aliens who in some ways are technological in their embodiment. And the term uplift comes from David Brin's Uplift series, where this is a common practice among aliens throughout the galaxy, where the aliens throughout our galaxy will attempt to and actually succeed at facilitating the evolution of species through our own galaxy, and it is a common practice. So one vision, and this connects back with the God vision of aliens and the benevolent vision of aliens and the hopeful vision of aliens, is that the aliens will come down and they will help us to rise up to a higher level of mentality, of civilization. And this is a theme that has come up repeatedly in science fiction. On the other hand, the aliens may be totally indifferent to us. They may not give a shit about humans. Going back to Lovecraft, The Color Out of Space, the alien in there, which is very strange, doesn't care at all about humans. In Roadside Picnic, the aliens come down here, have a picnic, throw the garbage away, take off, and never even announce that they were here to the humans. In Rendezvous with Rama by Clark, a giant alien spaceship comes into the solar system. Humans keep banging on the door, keep going exploring the inside of the ship, and the aliens never pay any attention to us. They can't even find who the aliens are that operate this giant ship. We're insignificant. The classic example, though, of recent times is Stephen Baxter's Zelee and Photina birds, who are the two most powerful alien species in our universe and are engaged in a multi-billion-year-long war. And humans are just insignificant and brushed aside in the process of this great cosmic war. And so in this case here, the indifference of aliens is carried to the extreme where it would be like humans having a war with each other and not paying any attention to the flies that are buzzing about. In this case, we're the flies. But the great cosmic saga is going to have nothing at all to do with us. We're insignificant, trivial, and the big powers out there won't even bother to acknowledge our presence. In fact, we become a nuisance to the Zelee, and they put us in a space-time bubble to get us out of the way. We have aliens who are technological in form, not biological necessarily, but in this case, they're technological. One of the best aliens ever created, I think, was back in the 1920s by Abraham Merritt, who was the top-notch writer of that period. And it was his novel, The Metal Monster. And the Metal Monster was this alien that consisted of trillions of individual metallic parts that could self-organize themselves into an indeterminately large number of different macro configurations. And in one sense, the Metal Monster was an entire city, but it was a city that was able to disintegrate, reintegrate, send off pieces of itself, and do it whatever its intentions happened to be. And it was all technological in its foundation and structuring. And I definitely think it's unequivocally one of the best aliens ever envisioned, and in particular, a technological alien. And in this case here, that did not have any definite shape, but could assume an incredible variety of different shapes in how it interacted with things around it. And it was psychedelic. The only way to describe contact with it would be to say one was entering into an acid trip with this thing. So a great book to read in case you've never heard of it, a great alien technological in its nature. Edmund Hamilton talked about technological aliens invading, attacking the Earth in the comet Doom. And Clark Ashton Smith, who I also mentioned before, talked about robotic aliens who, interestingly, are very rational, very productive, very organized, evolved out of the biological, but became mechanical entirely. And given their incredible rationality and order, what they end up suffering from is a form of self-destructive madness, as if the yin-yang of rationality and desire and emotion somehow could not be transcended. And so they end up self-destructing because their madness could not be contained. It's almost like the krill. We have the technological aliens of 2001, envisioned as the monolith. Then we have the blending together of technology and of biology in Star Trek's The Borg, where it's part techno and part biological. And in the mind of the Borg Queen, the synthesis of the biological and the technological is the most ideal form of intelligence in life. Pop culture, we have the Transformers, who, if we stop and think about it, indeed, they are aliens and they are robotic, and they come to the Earth to fight it out over whether the universe is going to continue or is going to come under the dominion of the evil Transformers as opposed to the good ones. And I already mentioned, but I want to reemphasize again, the inhibitors from Revelation Space are, in fact, technological intelligence which evolved, transcended out of the Dawn War, and now keeps the whole universe under a watchful eye to knock off any new people that want to come on the scene. But they are a technological intelligence, and there's a very good description in Revelation Space about the inhibitors too. So we have lots of technological intelligences. Now, of course, the strange and the bizarre in talking about aliens, obviously there's all different kinds of it. We've already talked about a lot of it. And I just should mention, we have this heritage of Stapleton, Hamilton, Merritt, and Smith to begin with, who envisioned lots of strange and bizarre aliens of all different kinds. But just to highlight out some other important works, Mission of Gravity, where this planet that's the scene of the story has this incredibly powerful gravitational force to it. And the aliens on it, who are very intelligent, are like centipedes who move along the surface, or insects, and are able to withstand and thrive with this immense gravity that they exist in. Or Old Faithful, where the description of the Martian in this is sort of captured there on the image. And the Martian has a very unusual mind as well as an unusual body, and is attempting to communicate with humans. And Last and First Men by Stapleton, we have alien intelligence, which is a swarm mind. So it's not an individual biological entity, but a huge plethora, a cloud that together has intelligence. If one wants to see a real assortment of fascinating and strange aliens, go look at Brin's The Uplift War from the Uplift series, and in particular, the Gabru, which I have a drawing of up there, who are bird-like aliens who have this interesting social structure to them, and are trying to knock off humans. And also the Timbrini up there, the woman who has tentacles around her head, which are telepathic tentacles. But the Uplift War has dozens and dozens of different strange and unusual aliens as a more contemporary vision. Vinod Vinji created really great aliens in A Fire Upon the Deep and A Deepness in the Sky. Most fascinating were the Tines from A Fire Upon the Deep, which were wolf-like creatures that only had a singular conscious identity as a pack. If the pack was separated, their consciousness disintegrated. So they were a gestalt mind made up out of multiple bodies. And also down below here from the same novel, we have the Scroters, who were a combination of plant intelligence and technology integrated together. So Vinji did a good job in A Fire Upon the Deep and A Deepness in the Sky of creating some unusual aliens and humans interacting with them. But the main thing is that he was very imaginative with how strange these were. Mugadit from Tiptree's Love is the Plan is Death was a very imaginative and strange alien. The War tetralogy had four-dimensional reality and aliens. The Algebraists had aliens who lived in a three-dimensional gas giant environment and were sort of shaped a bit like octopus, but there was a different kind of alien, because instead of being surface aliens, they move up and down, backwards and forwards in three dimensions, and their whole civilization is three-dimensional too. And then one of the great, more recent examples of strange aliens are the spiders from Children of Time, who are intelligent spiders who create a technological civilization with highly advanced structural, architectural communication features to it, but based upon web making and chemistry, as opposed to the way we put our civilization together. So they're basically intelligent spiders. We had intelligent spiders in the deepness of the sky too. Now we have the incomprehensible, mysterious uncertainty scenario. A Martian Odyssey, the Martians are to some degree incomprehensible. Solaris is an intelligent planet that is not comprehensible at all to humans. The Mote in God's Eye, also by Larry Niven. The aliens are very mysterious and difficult to understand what they're up to. The Expanse, which was based on Leviathan Wakes. The aliens are a distributed biological molecule that integrates and interpenetrates with humans, and it's hard to figure out what they're up to, but they're very incomprehensible. And both the movie and the books, actually, the TV series, are both very good, and they definitely have a mysterious quality to them. What are they up to? What are they all about? And just some other classic ones. I mentioned Embassy Town, Arrival, where the aliens have a circular consciousness of time. Annihilation, where the aliens are assimilating us but are totally inscrutable. Sputnik, which is a very strange alien from a Russian science fiction novel. And then finally I have up here Shile's Ladder, where we have aliens who exist in an alternate universe at a speeded up rate of time relative to us, and humans have to find some way to interact and communicate with these alien minds. And this is a really high-powered, go over the top, how strange and bizarre can you imagine an alien world and alien minds and still try to figure out some way to communicate with them. Now, I have up here just one story here. First contact. We make contact with aliens in outer space. We're not near our home, neither are the aliens, and we end up in a stalemate because neither of us trusts the other. And I put this up here that we are the alien scenario because when we think about aliens, we think of them as strange, we think of them as uncertain, but the fact is we could flip it over that from their point of view, we could be seen and obviously would be seen as very strange and uncertain too. So part of the thing here is not just simply going to be the fact that if we do contact aliens, they may be mysterious and bizarre relative to us, but we may be mysterious and bizarre relative to them. And this is a good example of that kind of theme. First contact. So we come down to our last slide, human enlightenment. The Moon Era, a great story about a human interacting with a being who lives on the moon millions of years ago, and how she elevates and teaches and enlightens the human in terms of the meaning of life. And it's a great alien story by Jack Williamson and a great alien. By Clark Ashton Smith, again, I mentioned before, City of Singing Flame, where humans and aliens all merge into this illuminating flame that somehow transforms them and elevates them, and how some humans in the novel participate in this metaphorical image here of a spouting light of all different colors that they embrace and fly up into. But it's an experience of enlightenment that comes in the process. C.S. Lewis attempted to enlighten us with a Christian theology space opera, and it's an example of attempting to enlighten us through envisioning aliens out there in space, but the aliens take the persona of Christian figures, including an Adam and Eve and a Christ. Starmaker clearly deals with human enlightenment through alien contact, because as the central human character moves through the story, he learns to understand and get a grasp of the different levels of mentality and resonate with them that will populate the universe into the future. So the human becomes progressively enlightened through contact with ever advancing alien forms. And then the final two I have up here, the one that I already introduced you to, The City in the Middle of the Night and Binti. These two novels deal with another possibility that I have not even mentioned so far, which is, what if we merge with the aliens? That is, instead of being adversarial, instead of being distinct, that in the final analysis and contacting aliens, what will happen will be that we will blend together. And that's what happens in The City in the Middle of the Night, and that's what happens in Binti, both of which have won awards over the last 4 or 5 years in science fiction, which are two very good novels about aliens. The aliens in The City in the Middle of the Night are what she calls crocodiles, but aren't really shaped like crocodiles. And in the end, the human, in order to realize a higher level of consciousness and enlightenment, actually is integrated together with the crocodiles. So we may achieve enlightenment and achieve togetherness by actually coming together physically, just like imagining coming together with technological realities. In this case, they're alien realities. So, just to close, summary and conclusion, insights and values about thinking of contact with aliens and alien intelligence. Insight into our own self-understanding psychologically and culturally. Aliens are a Rorschach projection test. When we envision aliens, we're simply projecting our various emotions and thoughts into outer space, into possibilities. Encounter scenarios illuminate the human psyche. Encounters with aliens can engender humility. They provide a cosmic perspective on us. We see ourselves relative to the big picture, which can include beings that are different and transcendent from us. And in fact, for some people, the whole alien context scenario involves a new theology, in the sense that our new gods and goddesses and deities are the aliens of outer space, who are above us and give us meaning and purpose, and in the end may redeem us, or maybe not. We gain insight into the human mind and human society through comparison. Like, we could ask questions like, well, what is intelligence? We know what it is for humans. What would it be for an alien? And how can we broaden our notion of intelligence? What is a mind? We know what we think about it with respect to humans, but what would it mean with respect to other kinds of intelligent beings? How would that broaden our concept of mind? What is a civilization? You know, we have our notions, but thinking about alien civilizations, it may be that we would be able to broaden significantly our ideas about what constitutes a civilization by envisioning aliens and alien civilizations. There's also psychological preparedness for the bolt out of the blue, psychosocial transformation. That is, just being cognizant of the fact that in spite of all of our concerns, in spite of all our worries, in spite of all of our busying around doing this and that, keep in mind that we're part of this big universe, and out there may be things that will come down here and visit us and would unsettle our whole reality. To put our complacency into perspective, expanding our consciousness, imaginative possibility space for thinking, facilitating of human evolution, psychologically, culturally, biologically. Aliens provide possible ideals, goals, alternatives for humanity. We think of the possibilities of life, intelligence, mind, and civilization by thinking about aliens. And they're just fascinating things to think about. And the stories are fascinating. If nothing else, it's enjoyable to read The Metal Monster, or to read The City in the Middle of the Night, or to read any of the other ones I've mentioned. The Uplift War is another great alien story. And it's psychologically enhanced understanding because it's presented in dramatic narrative. So science fiction does a better job of engaging the human mind when it comes to aliens, because we write stories and stories engage. And so it affects us at an emotional, personal level. Now, just as a little plug, that's the summary on this. I forgot one thing. The First Aliens, great YouTube on that is a good quick summary of a lot of the early visions of aliens. There's the link for it, and also I mentioned the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction. If you want to go read more about aliens, and there is a lot more to read about aliens than what I mentioned, and there's the article for aliens is about 15, 20 pages long and has a lot of additional stories, a lot of additional stuff on aliens. So here's where I was putting the plug in. A month from now, 4 weeks exactly, my next webinar, The Evolving Waves, Science Fiction Literature of the Last Decade. We're in a science fiction novel as a culture. Science fiction is the realism of our time. Kim Stanley Robinson. And in 4 weeks, I'm going to talk about great works of literature, science fiction literature, in roughly the last decade, including seasoned, long-term, very well-known science fiction writers from earlier decades who continue to produce very good stuff, very notable stuff. William Gibson, Kim Stanley Robinson, and Neil Stephenson, and talk about The Ministry of the Future and Seven Eves and The Peripheral, which are novels of the last 10 years, plus An Anthem, which is a little bit older, but it's definitely going to talk about that one too. The master of science fiction short stories of the last 10, 15 years, Ted Chiang, who writes kind of ontological fiction where he transcends in various different ways the constraints of acceptable or normal reality. It's sort of a blur between science fiction and philosophical speculation, but great stuff, short stuff, including Exhalation. You're familiar with, Arrival and The Story of Your Life, but there's lots of other things Chiang has written. Talk about him. John Scalzi, one of the more popular award-winning science fiction male writers of the last decade. Old Man's War, Red Shirts. And we'll talk about his novels. A whole bunch of other people: Annihilation, Children of Time, Ready Player One, Leviathan Wake. Some of these I've already mentioned today or mentioned in previous times. There's a lot of excellent stuff that has been written in the last 10 years, and we'll sample into it. Probably the most interesting and best, I would say best, thing coming out of the last 10 years or so is the Three Body Problem trilogy. And we'll spend some time talking about that. And that won several awards. But finally, as the key thing we will talk about, taking up a big chunk of the final webinar in the series, is that over the last dozen years, unequivocally, women have won the best novel in Locus, Nebula, and the Hugo vastly more than the men did. And there have been an incredible number of really top-notch new women science fiction writers and science fiction award-winning novels that they have written. I mentioned Charlie Jane Anders, Already to City in the Middle of the Night, but there's a whole slew of other ones that we will get into. And in fact, if in the meantime you want to read what I think is the best of the bunch from these science fiction novels by women of the last dozen years or so, read All the Birds in the Sky, also by Charlie Jane Anders. But there's been a lot of top-notch novels, award-winning novels written by women in the last dozen years or so. So that will be what we'll talk about in 4 weeks from today. And thanks for coming. And that was the end. And I did it in 2 hours. We had